so here we are at the start of turn 10, and I've pulled the Zodani fleet reinforcements into play. Got one loose admiral. I drew a whole bunch of crappy admirals. 3 plotting. Well, one has my best admiral in the game, my highest ranked admiral in the game, is a 3-0, which is pretty fucking shitty for the Zodani. It's not so bad for the Imperials. And a couple of 3+1s, which are so-so. I divided the forces up into their jump capability. I gave the best one, the jump 4 capable ships is the second smallest group, or the second largest group. Well, either way. So I could put this number 2 admiral, who's not too bad. At least he's got good some combat bonus. But this largest group, I threw the big troop carrier in because I figured that'll be more of a mop-up type thing. Those are jump 3 and 4. I've got a ship loose here that's jump 2, and I'm just gonna bring it in and, limp its way over. It may actually end up as a problem. 17th Colonial has a less highly ranked admiral, so I can't even join this with my other C2 fleet without badly harming the admiral, although better in combat, but harming the plot capability. I don't know how important the plot capability is. So on the attack, the big thing is once things start happening, reactions become more important. But there's also the bigger the plot, the more likely I'm going to fuck up stuff. Like plot 0 and 1, I can usually keep reasonably coordinated. I've got a loose admiral. He's not terribly good for anything except floating ships back and forth, because he will only be able to take a smaller portion of any given fleet. Now, he could divide. I could send him with this jump 3 fleet, and then we could divide that fleet up and just use it for mop-up type operations or something. That might not be a bad choice, because at least I'll get an admiral in the front who has, with ships, and when I get close enough, if it seems appropriate to try to capture planets, I can do that more quickly. All right, now we go over to the Imperials, who I want to call the Byzantines, because they're red, and I always use red for the Byzantines and empires of the Middle Ages. I don't know. I don't have a good argument for why. Okay. So what we do, we already got the colonial forces. We roll a die and we look at the table. And we are going to get 1 battle squadron, 4 cruisers, and no fleet or special markers. So then I look at the battle cruisers, or battle squadrons, or whatever, and I draw one at random, and that'll show up here. And 4 cruisers, which, this is not a complicated process, but there's my 4 cruisers. All my cruisers, wow, jump 6. That's got to be like Tech 15 if I recall correctly. Maybe not. Okay. So I've got a pretty nice fast fleet there. Task Force 17 is not particularly fast. I also don't have a leader, though. I'm going to incorporate these into Task Force 17. It's got orders. And I still have a backup fleet. So, whoops. We'll just incorporate these in, and that'll get it moving a little faster until and unless I get a leader assigned to it. I also have a loose leader here who could take over. Who's a little bit more flexible. But let's look at our command ratings. So the corridor fleet's in what I'd call a pretty good leader. He's got a combat bonus, which is just gravy as far as I'm concerned. but he's got that good plot rating. And I consider that really, really important because that's how you join or avoid combat, basically. This would not be a bad turn to buy some replacements either. Now, this is turn 10, so we get 2 and 1. And the Zodani also get a pile of replacements this turn, which that might change how I order my fleets. So I get 15 squadron and 5 troop, and we'll look and see, because I've got some replacements to build. As I just recorded the 2 and 1 that I'm going to get each turn. I've thrown some pieces in the bag that I know I don't want to build. Honestly, I could probably throw these cruisers in too. I don't really want them. The scouts are actually better than this cruiser, just because they have a bombardment value, but the cruiser serves as a better defensive value. But there's nothing there I want to build, and it would be slowing down my fleet. My fleet has a jump. Oh no, I've got a jump 3 up there. Is it worth it? Three squadron points for a kind of shitty ship? I don't think so. I think I'll hold off on that. Remember, if I ever roll a 6, the first 6 I roll gets me these guys. And I think probably a fleet and whatever. And they're the Black Glove ships, and I'll never remember what they are. I remember to set them aside, but I can't remember anything else. For the Zodani, though, I built all my ships. Everything looked reasonable. Everything was at least jump 3, and I was able to just, add some padding to those fleets so they're a little stronger. And I built some more troops up. Troops, well, I didn't have any losses there, but at least one of my fleets is going to go through Jewel, the jump 3 fleet, I would assume. So I upgraded one of the units there that I probably should have taken with me anyway. It's hard to remember, and I figure, well, let's make that a little bit better unit. I still have 1 troop point left. I don't know when I'll get a chance to build that thing back. Now it's 10 more turns till I get more reinforcements, and I don't know, the Zodani reinforcement selection does not impress me this time. We'll see if it gets any better on turn 20. Mainly, I think, it's gonna take a long time for them to get up front as well. And now we start executing our moves, and these fleets don't get to move until and unless they have a commander in charge with ships and a fleet, etc. So, like, Task Force 17 couldn't have been created if I didn't have this ship there. I could now leave it behind because it's kind of slow, but I don't want to do that. But yeah, these others, the fleets just got created, and they're, starting to write their orders at the end of this turn. So it's going to be, three more turns after this one before they even start to come on the board. Movement is more or less what we expected from other discussions. You can see we're creating a lot of problems all over the place. I marked this as well because I got to do a fleet combine there. That's the quarter fleet, and all the Imperials are gathered, ready to try to act like a hammer somewhere. And I mean, if it's bigger than any of the Zodani fleets, it can kind of pick them off one at a time, but I don't think that's the case. I still probably want to consolidate forces as much as possible. So, like, if this starts getting close in here, these guys are going to want to combine somewhere, just get that extra firepower in. And likewise, all this dancing around with the second assault trying to avoid the first assault, yeah, that's all great and wonderful, but that changes flavor once we're talking about huge fleets facing each other. The plus on the firepower just doesn't give you, doesn't give you that big an advantage compared to just boosting the overall firepower. So big fleets rule is basically the thing, but they're generally tend to get in the hands of incompetent leaders, and they're hard to refuel. So there are advantages to staying small. Plus, the Zordani, if they can concentrate a big fleet but have some smaller forces elsewhere, they can keep racking up points, which is sort of how they win. All right, that's going to put us into the combat phase and give me time for a break and probably play some Sherlock Holmes and see if it makes me sick. As battles go, it feels like things are picking up. Graham still stuck sieging Villas, but here all three fell. Up here, one of them fell. I ran into something kind of... I found the tech level 16 unit, which doesn't give anything. I think it says beta on it. My eyes aren't very good, but I don't think I could ever read it very well, so... as its unit designation. Over here, I ran into something kind of big, but my assault fleet... Well, the big thing is, there weren't a huge number of SDVs, just 10. That was enough to cause a casualty. That casualty I took on a tanker, because I'm never going to get that thing home with a jump 2. So, screw it. Take it as a loss, rebuild it, and... Or not, I don't know. Tankers are useful, but... usually in very few rare situations. But anyway, I'm stuck here without fuel. I don't know, I may move the Colonial in there, I may not. He's got a plotting of 1. We got 1,500 troops there, plus another 1,600 troops. You know, that's an amount you gotta bomb down to something reasonable. You can basically bomb the shit out of forces, and they cannot defend against that. And you can get rid of them just through bombardment. Something the Air Force would love to be true. The U.S. has tried it many, many times. We have never, I think, successfully only bombed forces. So if there's any place where something like this weird SDB type thing, although it still doesn't make sense, basically bombing a small force out of existence is impossible. It doesn't matter if it started large or if it was small all along. You just can't do it. So eventually you need the ground troops to mop up something small. Now, in reality, because of the time and whatever, the clock in the game, the Zordani end up sending mop-up forces in against small forces, but it just doesn't make sense to risk your big armies, because those big armies can pretty much guarantee you wins on planets. So fighting against something like this, we can hold a little bit, I think. Points after all of this are up to 224.5. Remember, I only have to get to 300. Anytime before turn 26, I can just win by hitting that 300. In fact, anytime in the game. But it just isn't looking like the Zordani are going to be able to be stopped. The only thing the Imperials can do is launch their big fleet and hope that they can start wiping forces out. Now that they have a fleet, it's time to start chasing, I guess. All right, I got to do movement plots still, and that's kind of important because that's why this token's still there. I got to create that big fleet. I think it's just going to all go into one thing, but there's some ships there that can't, that have to remain on their own, and I have to apportion the admirals and everything and figure out what the fuck's going on. And I don't really have time today. Apparently there's a fire not far away. I don't think it's a wildfire per se. But it's showing up as a big fire, and I was hearing a lot of helicopters and shit, and the sun was funny colored and everything. It seems to be clearing up a little bit. There's a lot of smog out there, but yeah, closer. Something that showed up on the wildfire map that's closer than I've seen yet, but no alerts or anything, so I think it was completely contained. I mean, it was within civilized area. After consolidating the quarter fleet, and boy, it looks big. But part of the problem with this is there are jump 3 capable ships in there. Let me see how many, because that's a potent looking fleet, but if there aren't a lot of jump 3s, jump 4 would make a big difference. Jump 4 means that I could come from here. 1, 2, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. See, I'm looking for a base that I can operate out of. Dinham is the closest base. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to be able to get there. I'm not going to be able to make it right to Regina and fight for that or anything. So I'm not sure that the jump 4 is that terrible a thing. I may want to take another admiral, though, in case I do want to peel off forces. As it stands right now, I've got a couple of admirals here. This guy's pretty bad at hauling people around, so I'm going to take him as a reserve admiral, although I really would like that 0 command for the flexibility of... Yeah, let me take the 0 command for the flexibility of pulling people in and out for now. But I've got to find a place, and unfortunately, I am not going to be able to refuel anywhere easily. So wherever I put myself, I'm going to be a sitting target to these 2 fleets hitting. I think I can take them. That's my feeling. I don't know how big they are. I mean, I do. I've seen them hitting stuff. I know how big I look. That's probably going to be game to a large extent if they do go for that. The Zodani might not want to take that risk, though. We'll see. They do not know how big this is. Precisely. But they can look at the stack, man. They got spies and stuff, right? Psionic spies. I don't know. But I'm working on my plot, and it's tricky at this point. We've got some consolidation going on, so like, what is it? This really slow fleet here, which has a C2 in it that I think I accidentally was pulling too quickly, is still working its way up to gain another cruiser. It doesn't do it a lot of good, but maybe that fleet will stumble in to the same space as my main fleet on an attack, and I'll just get lucky. This thing is just really not very useful for much of anything, to tell you the truth. And then these guys are all largely planned. So yeah, not much I can do there. All right. Kind of a strange problem for both players is there's no bases here, no military bases. Dinham, and then to this line. So, normally that's not a big deal. Like, if you're playing Traveler, hey, I can go into the starport, maybe I can't get the best stuff available, but I can get fuel and I can get minor repairs and stuff done. So, no big deal. But for the fleets, about the only place that a fleet without completely being streamlined, which Youthith is completely partially streamlined, so that can actually jump out of gas giant planets, but the third assault fleet is not. And when you get a big fleet together, it probably isn't. It's just weird that Vargr seem to have a high reliance on streamlining. So that means neither side can really cross this comfortably. And that's kind of neat for the Zodani because that gives me alert lead time for both of these fleets. Now, they only have a 2 plotting, which isn't great, but it's not terrible either. So if they start seeing the Imperials come over here, I may have enough time to gather together as long as I keep my fleets close together. Rui is interesting because there was a scenario on it. Oh, it's nasty. What the hell? Why is there like a huge force? Well, why is there a garrison sitting there? I don't know why. I'm leaving it as is. There may have been a setup allowance for being on Rui. There may not have been, but something weird happened, and they're there one way or another. So yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out, how to keep these guys close enough together. Once again, a whole bunch of what amount to battle operations against planets. These should largely be resolved easily. Obviously, Villas is continuing to be a problem, but I think most of the rest of these are pretty small. Let me just make sure I smudge units enough that like I can see what's going on. Still nothing coming on the board. Too long a delay on those commands. Last turn, not a lot of gains on the victory points. In fact, I think, well, I got this. Whatever this was worth, Tinandale. That was worth 4. It's halved because it's outside the Imperial territory. I could have conquered these, but in both cases, Dinham here is barely worth it at 3. I mean, 4 for this, but I'm in close. What the hell, I don't know. The important thing was, hey, position myself in these, get some points, but the corridor fleet got awfully close. And I'm kind of like, I don't know about capturing anything. Heffrey, similarly, Heffrey's up here. It'll surrender if an enemy fleet gets there, so that's even less appealing than Dinham, but pretty much whatever garrison I leave is trivial to kill. So leaving garrisons behind when the enemy's close in seems like a bad idea. It might not be, but I have a limited amount of small units that I can scatter around for such things. And I gotta remember these fuckers. These guys gain some points too, for whatever it's worth. I don't know if I've been paying attention. I don't think I did last turn. I just kind of consider that as, oh, well, that's taken care of now. Well, not so much. What do I care about Rylanor? Well, the problem with Rylanor is that 200 SDVs that's sitting there. I thought that was safe. It's not. And I'm probably never going to take advantage of those. The secret base is at Fullison, wherever the fuck that is, which ended up having a garrison on it. So it's like, well, you know, if that 13 points is going to put me over, maybe it's worth taking a chance on it, especially if things are getting close. But right now, let's just hold. No reason to open it up, because then, you know, this is right in the middle of Imperial territory. They could very easily retake it. So again, it's not worth going for. But yeah, otherwise, we didn't succeed here at Bugin. We're close. We've got it down to just this 1/10 of a point of unit. We weren't able to get that last 10% on it, and that's going to slow us down because we can't refuel. This thing at least refueled at LL, even though I haven't taken that yet, so that's okay. So I've got some capability to like try to gather my forces to face that big corridor fleet, and we'll see what the showdown ends up being like. I don't feel too uncomfortable if it's like 2 real Zodan fleets. But if it's these 2, I kind of don't think I can face the corridor fleet. So I'm going to take that into consideration as I do my plots. For the corridor fleet, they feel like they want to smash things one at a time if they can, but that may be beyond my reach. And instead, all that maybe I can do is kind of handcuff those Zodani fleets in the center, playing a little whack-a-mole game there. Kind of game of whack-a-mole, this is where things get kind of tricky, because I more or less know what these guys are up to. So I've got to make a decision with the corridor fleet, what I'm doing. My most attractive are going after one of these bases. There are a number of bases within range, including Roop, which is actually where they're trying to gather, but it may not be the best place to hit them. I have a range for this fleet of only 3. It's been reduced. So I'm going to roll 1 through 6 for those locations. Right now I've got to refuel, so that's not going to help me. I'll probably try to figure out how those scouts are going to get where I want to go. They're fine where they are right now, but I want them with my fleet when my fleet gets where it's going. That could be a problem, though. All right, So I'm actually going to aim for Dinham. Dinham's not a base. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's redo this. 1, 2, 3. We'll go for Regina at 2314, and that's kind of the obvious place to go. That gives me the most support. My scouts can travel with me, whatever. Being obvious, though, that's not where the Zodani are going. But I'm not unhappy about it. In fact, if I were to do, so I had 5 choices out of 6. I'm not going to send it here, obviously. This would have been my double up choice, so I don't feel bad about it at all. Anyway, that's the end of the 11th turn. So this is our movement. 17th Colonial is recharging its batteries. Some of these others making some more movements. The biggie being a consolidation at Roop. What does that mean? Well, actually, almost everything is kind of gathering towards there. And if the Imperial fleet was going to jump into there on the next turn, they might be thinking, yeah, nah, not anymore. You know, maybe it would make more sense to move towards Regina or something and take some of these points back away. Because if the Zodani fleet is consolidated, it's probably bigger than us. And then we just don't want to get caught. But we want to make sure, while they're consolidated, they're not going to grow as many victory points. And they're going to have more trouble. You know, they're still not going to have an easy time catching us, is basically the thing. You can basically avoid the enemy pretty easily in this game. Now, there are modifications that can be done, like sending a partial fleet that's good at capturing weakly held planets and grabbing them. You have to be real careful in those cases. Otherwise, you run into something like Lousy and you're like, oops, I fucked up, you know? And Lousy is actually in a particularly important location, which is one of the real problems, and why it's so heavily defended probably, is that it's a key strategic planet with a large population that, you know, can actually support trying to defend that perimeter of the Empire. All right, so we handle the battles. Let's jump to Roop, where there was nothing defending it. I bombed the shit out of it, it was already at like 40% or 30%, got another 50% hit on the 3,000 troops there. That's a huge force. But that brings it down to 80% losses, so there's 600 guys left. I did not only send this unit down, I notionally said, look, I'm sending all the big guys down to a good odds number based on I don't hit at all or whatever, based on that 600. But this 100 men versus that 600, because of the so that would be a 1 to 5. It's first fire, so you know it would be a target if I went down, if I failed to kill, but whatever. But at 1 to 5, there's 8 column shifts because of the tech difference. That brought it up to 5 to 1. It was very easy. I wiped out the remainder of the Roop forces. So we get the big 6 victory points. I think I'm going to cash that in. Probably. I don't know. May not be worth it for 6. On the other hand, I'm stuck there for a turn. So basically I'm trying to look because I'm not that far from victory, but yeah, 6 points there. I'm going to get another 10 on Garda Villas very shortly. What am I going to get in these other places? I don't know. So I may end up abandoning it, but let me land some troops there to garrison it, at least for now. Captured some other planets. This one doesn't matter. It's worth 0. But Bugina is worth 13. With everything that I grabbed, I'm up to 264.5. Like I said, it's getting real close. The Imperials cannot allow the Zodani to grab, you know, planets up here while I'm tied down facing this force or whatever. So I don't know, you know. If I launch the attack and lose, I lose the game. The trickle of reinforcements won't matter. If I launch the battle and win, I probably win the game. Although again, you know, the Zodani could pull back, right? Count on their next big wave of reinforcement. Actually, they got a big wave coming in right now. A whole lot more, I think, than, I mean, we're basically talking about this fleet. So, about the same size probably as the Corridor fleet. I don't know. But it's got to split up and make its way there. So there might be wave after wave of Zodani that a badly, you know, a Pyrrhic victory might not do the Imperials that much good. This is not the entirety of the Zodani fleet here. There's fair amounts that are not concentrated there. So, dunno. But it's time to plot. We got one of the special rolls here, which is a 1. Came up with a fleet and a bunch of cruiser squadrons. I parked the cruisers in Task Force 17 again. But that gives me a fleet, and I'll just find me the 18th. Because I can't really differentiate anymore. And we'll write that here. Waste of time to do this in front of you, but I already got some spare fleets, so that's not that big a deal. We also get an admiral who might end up, I'm going to have to shake them, they're too big a deal, and a special drawn from there. Now, what's confusing me is I don't think these troops ever come in. I'm going to have to look to see if that's the case. I had thought everything came in, but there's no recourse to bring those extra troops in. These came in on the board in the rimward side. And there doesn't seem to be any indication of troops coming in. Now, bringing those... there are extra assault ships and whatnot here. They don't make a lot of sense unless there's additional troops coming in. I mean, yes, there's some troops still garrisoning, but most of them have been wiped out. Most of them were pretty crappy, you know, low-tech stuff. This is the real stuff, the Imperial stuff, and it should be making it on the board somehow. So, at the very least, I feel like something should be coming up. The reinforcements card here in the rules, there is a buried in. All troops in the troop group are available on turn 10, although their actual entry into play depends on the arrival of squadrons. No big deal there. We're okay then. And yeah, maybe I could have gotten something in. It hasn't been that many turns. I don't know if there's been anything in the box that could have moved. It would have, if I had moved this fleet out already, I would have repositioned forces on it, but it doesn't move yet. I don't know. Is it moving this turn yet? I think next turn. Unless I draw an admiral, that's good. Well, the admiral we drew was a kick in the teeth. The #1 ranked admiral in the fleet. And he sucks. I don't recognize the name. So I've created 2 different groups. Task Force 17 is still going to exist to move what's really a bunch of quality cruisers up more quickly. This thing, man, I don't trust bringing that into play at all, sort of. I mean, it's got to get out of here so that it doesn't eat up more reinforcements. But he's got 10 ships, mainly battleship quality. And once the Imperial warrant comes out, I can, like, dismiss this guy or whatever. But without that, I can't just make him go sit in St. Louis. All right. That's going to put us to the movement phase. This was a hefty replacement and reinforcement phase, and I don't think there's anything else going on there, so we'll go to movement. And this is largely a refueling turn for the Zodani. Graham fleet. This thing made a jump and is kind of in a dangerous position at this point. Refueling. What? Oh yeah, I'm gonna go up and capture Pixie and grab the 13 points for that, because that's too many points to just leave lying back there. The reason I abandoned it before was I'd either have to leave a ship or a troop that could surrender with the Vargar up there. And the Vargar don't have a lot of forces in any case. And I was threatened by the 212th fleet up there. I guess the interesting thing, if there is anything interesting left, is that I didn't move this. Is that we're trying to retake Regina, and we should be able to retake it. It's got no garrison anymore of any significance. I think we're talking about a 20-point unit here. So the Zodani are going to gain 3 points for the turn. You know, they're no longer in the rich point phase until something is done about the fleet situation. And this is kind of a pain in the ass. First of all, the Zodani are scared because they heard the bombardment factors that this fleet just unleashed. It was above 90, 93 or something like that. Not quite the 96 of 2 rolls there. Whatever, you know, actually what I declared was 90, I guess, because I couldn't get any more rolls on the table. But even with that huge bombardment factor against a tiny force of 20 strength points, which presumably is actually spread around the planet, which is the problem. You know, small forces everywhere. Although that really doesn't make sense when you're looking at a tiny garrison, right? Like, look, there's, once you get to some level or another, you just don't have enough troops to cover the whole planet. So you're garrisoning the star base or whatever, in which case you're a target. But here, all that firepower did like 70% damage. So now I have the painful process of digging through for the ground troops that are gonna, I don't know why this is here. Probably removing something that was needed somewhere, but that are going to land there and take that on. I also have an additional, by the way, Regina's not worth 10, it's worth 20 because it's a regional capital. I said that wrong. But so actually the Zodani are going to lose points this turn, but that's not going to generally be the case. There's one big fleet operating against them, and they have several still gathering points. I may well want to drop a bunch of my troops off of Regina, but I gotta carry some troops with me to retake planets because I need to throw ground troops into there to do that. Now, it all makes sense that I need to throw ground troops in there. The problem is the way the game represents things, how the components interact and whatever. I gotta paw through all these pieces and try to find, the proper strike force and then the pieces I want to leave behind and all that. And so basically, I guess I just have to reassign all the troops on the ships and make my figuring as to what I want to do. It didn't end up being as big as I expected. What I'm doing is I'm detaching the first provisional fleet again with 2 of the big troop transport carriers. I'm going to send that back. Well, I may have issues with that. I may need to keep it under cover of the fleet, but I may also end up using it for an opportunistic attack when one occurs. And honestly, most of the other ships don't have troops on them, so fuck it. It's easier not to. But yeah, those big points changed hands, and now I've got, what, nothing? I got Pixie. Pixie is going to be 13 points, in my favor. I just have to drop a garrison there. Hold off talking about reinforcements until after I did the movement. But we got some more ships and deployed them split between the two fleets in the Imperial reinforcements. Nothing too exciting, just a rebalancing act, you know, it's just going to constantly happen until they move out because of the shared, you know, trying to keep the commands at the right level. But I did think of something that's sort of a gamey aspect I'm not going to take advantage of that I don't like. So one of these fleets could drop off everything except like one ship. And then I could send that you know, and leave a pile of non-fleet assets. And I believe the way the rules work, those non-fleet assets don't require an admiral. And the admiral can command the fleet with his one crappy little scout ship or whatever that can leave him behind later by turning into not a fleet. I think that's bending the intention of the rules. The reason to do that would be to get this faster, you know, a better admiral into play. And there'd be all kinds of opportunities for that kind of crap. I'm just not going to play that game. I think that would be a misuse of the rules in the same way that, like, trying to bend your orders in a CWB game is a misuse. There's an intention to the command structure, and you've got to try to follow it. EU has similar little gamey shit you can play that I don't like either. I ran into a bit of a cock-up, maybe because of ships I added as this, you know, was growing into a larger and larger force. I'm going to leave it be. Well, I'm actually going to reverse the cock-up, which is I had Task Force 17 jumping all the way out to here. That's a jump of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not 3. I can't, like, go here, even though technically I probably could. Well, any kind of, if you tried to think about it, you know, this is kind of positioned next to there. It's got to be in one of these two hexes in that case. In which case, you know, okay, if it's here, it can't reach here. But if it's here, it could. I'm leaving that alone, though. Instead, what I did was I added a jump for this turn into here and pushed the other jumps out a little bit. I think that's fair. Whatever, you know. It would be the kind of thing that if I noticed it in a game, I would ask my opponent, hey, here's what I did. Do you mind? And if they said yes, I would strictly follow the rules and, you know, change the, you know, cancel all my plots and get stuck way behind because of it. But honestly, that kind of mistake is pretty common. So I generally will say, yeah, that's fine. You know, it's because of this weird collection happening way back here, and it just would seem an unreasonable penalty compared to the magnitude of the error. What it really comes down to, though, is if you're looking for any kind of flexibility in your fleet, don't assume that your jump values will remain the same, or you will write illegal jumps. What the actual resolution should be, I'm not sure whether it's canceling, whether it has to do with the fleet maintenance, which again, you could game that. Right? You could prevent a jump from happening. Of course, you can always cancel, so that doesn't really help you within the rules. I'm trying to go on to the Zodani movement, but you can see the corridor fleet, etc., has moved up. Of course, the Zodani are going to flee from there. They already have orders to get out of there. So our post-movement situation. 17th was refueled. We got some of these moving their way down. Graham making an attack on Gardovillis. Over here, fleet is combining at Ferry and going to launch an attack there. Second assault fleet put itself in a more exposed position. I probably have to consolidate all the Zodani fleets, scare the corridor fleet away. Nice thing for all of this is that the 17th Colonial is feeling kind of like, yeah, I can go somewhere else. Maybe not Regina, but I can still operate in this area. One thing that I'm leaving out so far, Lanth is an important place to go. Lanth is worth 11 tech, but it's a provincial, it's a subsector capital, so it's worth 22 points. That's a big chunk of what I got left. I don't know, do I have the Sword Worlds heading off that way? I think I do. But it's kind of a pain for the Sword Worlds because they don't have the capacity to make this jump. So whatever they do over here, they're going to have to backtrack. I figure that's better at this point, the Sword Worlds fleet. You know, it would be nice to have those ships in my main battle fleets or whatever, but right now, I think the best thing I can do is collect points there while I'm fighting elsewhere. Reinforcements coming in on both sides, really. Task Force 17 already showing up. Take care of the battles. Battles, most of them just locked in combat still. The one exception, Roop, has been retaken. It was an easy task. There were, you know, a 10-factor garrison down there that just bomb it and drop something big on it and boom, it's gone. Ferry, and LL for that matter. Okay, LL, maybe I could have pushed to get, but no matter what, I would have to refuel, and that would take a turn's refueling, even if I capture it. And I've actually got 2 turns of refueling planned on this fleet, whatever, you know. That's kind of a stupid thing to do, in the sense that, yeah, it's probably true if I'm conservative, but it precludes the ability to say, you know what, damn the torpedoes, I'm going to throw a bunch of troops in here, some of which are going to get killed, because I need to take the planet and I need to get out of there more quickly. And that's an exposed vulnerability right now. Corridor fleet could easily go in there, shoot the shit out of the 2nd Assault Fleet, send it flying back, whatever's left of it, because chances are the space combat table isn't going to wipe out an enemy. So, you know, if you're looking at 48 attack factors, that only takes a quarter, less than a quarter of the defense factors. Usually defense factors are at least as high as the attack factors. So you're not going to destroy a fleet in an engagement usually, unless it's heavily outnumbered. Now this is a big outnumbering, but it's not that big. More questionable is my sitting here at Ferry. I could have chosen to push down, but what I found was I forgot to write orders for the 1st Assault Fleet, or for the 3rd Assault Fleet, which is fucking humongous now, and at this point I don't think the Corridor Fleet wants to face it. I think after hearing the bombardment factors that hit, they're kind of like, yeah, and looking, you know, essentially looking at that size. They're like, yeah, I can't. I just can't. But I can limit the increase until we get a big enough fleet into play to be able to face it. And that means it's not really safe for me to be around here. Now, Corridor Fleet's already written its orders too. Luckily for me, it's pulling away. But yeah, the decision, the failure to write orders means I can't push harder at Ferry, or pushing harder doesn't do me much good. Refueling doesn't really help me. Well, here's one place the refueling would help. These fleets are not refueled, which means if they get hit next turn, they may not be able to get away. So, yeah. They won't be able to necessarily retreat from combat. However, the surface interaction happens after space combat, yeah. So, yeah, I might just be forced to fight to the bitter end and not be able to retreat. That would be a way to destroy the 2nd Assault Fleet. And they're feeling very uncomfortable in the position they're in. That extra turn of refueling doesn't really hurt in that sense. All right, I guess it's on to the movement plot. That's always the painful part of the game, you know, figuring out where everything's going to go and whatnot, except for the zero movement guys when they're interacting with other stuff, where you're basically doing the same thing for one fleet, but have to look over and see what all the other fleets are doing very shortly. Hey, turn 15. Reinforcements for the Imperials. A handful of cruisers, another fleet. Special, well, the Admiral that came with that fleet is sort of the best there is in the game. 0+3. I mean, this is the god you want, right? It could have been a major boon for the Imperials if the Warrant had come up with it. Instead, a tanker came up. The Warrant would allow him to just take command of whatever fleet he wanted, keeping him around there in the hopes of getting the Warrant or in the hopes of more ships showing up. I've got an additional couple of fleets that I could throw on the board, so I don't need more fleet counters. I need more ships, but I'm gonna keep sending under my commander-in-chief or whatever is horrible forward. It's a Saturday. I'm in better shape than usual on Saturdays. It's late in the day though, because you know, outside of any kind of hangover type effect, exhaustion, energy depletion from the dancing, there's a lethargy and a letdown every time I come back from the dancing, and it throws me into a kind of a depression, even if I'm not, you know, physically hindered, at least not exceedingly so. And I think that's always kind of been the case. If I don't have, even if I have someplace, like I remember even when I would go dancing a second day right after the night, I would have a lot of sort of, I don't know if I want to do this, and I'd be fine because, you know, I planned for it, whatever, but getting in motion is difficult. Anyway, I'm playing Spore now, although I don't know how much more of it I can take. Reactionary movement, the Imperials had to move first, and that gave the Zidani a nice alert. I don't know how much it's going to help. By moving the provisional fleet here, along with some scouts, that's a pretty good signal the corridor fleet's going back there. I can't be sure. The 17th Colonial might have been able, you know, it probably would be able to defeat this, but I can't throw it away to the corridor fleet. So I'm moving this way. Another option would have been to try to limp my way back towards the Graham fleet and build something else, but I'm gonna head this way for victory points down in this area, I guess. This is not a fast jumping fleet, but it's very nimble in the sense that, like, it has the zero command spec. And now we go to the written orders, but I thought that was kind of an interesting situation developing there. Things fell. Gardavilis, I made a push there because, well, even though I'm resting next turn, I was worried I wouldn't be able to get it next turn, but probably my worries were overblown. And I also captured Ferry. That gets us up to 267.5. We're getting real close. I don't know how you prevent the Zidani from winning. I really don't. Like, yeah, if I fight this and win, sure, but I'm outnumbered, you know. I got a chance of hunting this thing down, and to me that'll be kind of a moral victory if I defeat one of their fleets, even if it's a shitty jump to squadron. And this fleet is taking so long. Why is it not there? 18th fleet. These guys should be part of the fleet. Yeah, I could have dispatched like a section of that fleet again. I could cut it in half again with that new good leader. It's beginning to feel a little goofy to just keep doing that. To me, that starts feeling gamey, leaving the commanding general behind and like continually dropping his fleet. But maybe it makes sense this time because the only reason he's there is he's so delayed that splitting his fleet again might make some sense, especially since I need my reinforcements pretty badly. A couple of interesting things where I didn't capture. So, for example, I didn't capture Wenge. I don't need to. I'm refueled, I'm fine. But I also didn't capture a Lel, which I want to take because it's worth 10 victory points. But, I don't have any troops with my second assault fleet. And I have an assault carrier ship that, well, I could pick up some troops here, big pile, 600 troops or whatever, and start shipping them back as well. And since I'm beginning to like eat up my garrisons and may have to start using large units for garrisons, I think I actually had to here at Gardavillas. Sword World has very few troops. But yeah, I kind of need to start running ships back to getting the extra troops for further garrisons. I really wish there were piles and piles of little garrisoning troops. That's what I'm missing. But I can't grab that. All I can grab is big chunks of troops, I think. I don't know. This might have more. Nope. Okay. And I guess that's about it. I do have to think about that. I will be doing the ordering later. Okay, so here on turn 16, we're getting some more reinforcements for this fleet that still can't leave, but we're getting considerable amounts of traffic confusion. These two fleets want to hook up, create a mega fleet that has more chance of doing a lot of damage. The second assault isn't big enough on its own. Third assault is humongous. I might actually be able to split that into two fleets, one way or another, but I've got to rebalance them. And their leadership is essentially the same, so no biggie there. The break-off ships have moved up, but these guys are having trouble finding their connection. Plotting 2 turns in advance, it's like Laurel and Hardy. Otherwise, Task Force 17, which is well led, is finding itself in an icky position. If that corridor fleet was better led, it would catch them and destroy them. Unfortunately, it's not. It's pretty well led, actually. Actually, they may have them next turn because they're stuck in a place where they're refueling. I should have pulled back this way. Instead, I charged in. Without these guys able to come to its rescue, I think we're losing that 17th Colonial with its good leader. Terrible. The Empire strikes back. And that'll put us into the combat phase. We're not seeing a whole hell of a lot. The only important thing is Quarter Fleet grabbing more stuff. Quarter Fleet can't bring everything that it wants with it because, well, it can't bring its scouts and such not. They're just not fast enough to get there. But I may also dispatch a small fleet. I have an assault fleet there under the provisional, which could grab back some victory points over here. There's not much danger from either of these. They're not all that close, but I gotta be careful. Still enough Zodan fleets out there that we're holding even with the quarter fleet capturing, kind of valuable things like, I don't know if Genji is all that valuable, but Regino definitely was. But yeah, we've seen What did we see fall? LL. We took wood shears. That's worth 9. And so, you know, we're at 277.5. There's not a lot of room for error here. You know, the Imperials have to wipe shit like this out. But the big thing is they have to prevent, you know, those extra points from flowing in. And while this big fleet's wiping shit out, it's not taking any of these. Now, again, I'm gonna reposition so that I can take one of these planets a turn until Graham or this fleet comes into play. But, you know, I'm still fighting against this split up that's meant to gather some of the points that came from territories that have been left behind. And even shitty planets are starting to look worth it just to try to push me over the edge there. All right. That's going to put us on the movement plot phase, and I am in no condition to do that right now. I'm in a condition to speak a little bit further. So, some lights off, but the game is a situation kind of akin to, say, the Japanese attack on U.S. and European nations at the beginning of their involvement in the wider part of World War II, as in not just China. You want to hit hard and basically grab everything you can. And there's sort of this balancing turn, right? Now, it's possible that the Zodani could destroy the corridor fleet, and then it's just over, right? You know, there's nothing that the Imperials have that can stop the Zodani there. But the tension and the excitement of the game is in these couple turns here. Before this was set up so that you were in a position where you could win the game. But now it's coming down to the line. Will the reinforcements get into play quickly enough, strong enough? Will the die rolls for the lucky die rolls give you enough advantages? Of course, there's did you fuck up as the Zodani, which will extend the amount of time that the Imperials have. And there certainly have been fuck-ups. Down here, this took longer than it probably should have. I've done things where I hit planets like Lousy that I should never have gone into. Yet, I'm still, you know, within conceivably a couple of turns gain of winning the game. At any point within, you know, recently, right? Just in terms of like, if I get enough fleets with capability to capture stuff into the right places and don't get unlucky or whatever, it could just go like that. So this is the period where the tension and the excitement really is. If the Imperials make it past this, and the fleets are, you know, they're starting to get the advantage in the fleets, they should be able to claw things back. But however long this period is, this is all it is. And in terms of like, you know, the satisfaction in the game, you gotta say a lot of the World War II stuff is kind of like this. If you look at some of the big East Front games that cover the whole front, especially of this era, you're looking at, hey, you know, can you hold the Germans off long enough that your reinforcements come in, and then the game is basically over. It really is. It becomes well, you know, there's the question of who won the war, and then the question of, well, how well did you do within that could be asked. I know some games sort of shift the victory conditions or play around with stuff. In particular, God, I'm trying to remember what it is. I did the case blue thing, but not OCS. This is a strategic game, and I really liked it, and now I can't remember it, and I can't see it because my games aren't set up right anymore. Jesus. It was Salvasta's game. And I'm just not seeing it. It's a pity. Oh, it's got to be down here. Down here in the dark. Unconditional surrender. Yeah. You really needed me to do that. But yeah, unconditional surrender has some little gamey mechanisms in there to try to keep that interesting without it being that standard, hey, how far can you go? So if you knock the Russians out early, it kind of changes the victory conditions for the game. And it sort of guarantees you a full game, no matter what. But for the most part, the World War II games are very much of that nature. Of one side has the advantage early in the war, the other side has the advantage late in the war, and there's this sort of tipping point. And once you get past that tipping point, how do you evaluate the game? Well, something like Third Reich makes some of the minimal victory conditions for the Axis side, survival to past certain dates and whatnot. And, that keeps it interesting. This doesn't do that. This gives you a automatic victory. Well, no, let me withdraw that. We reach turn 26. If the Zodani are still doing pretty well, but it looks like the war's tide has changed, they do get that built in. So there's nothing to really complain about here. It's really a design, though, that's based off of that World War II game, Victory Point Balancing Act, where you do well enough at an early enough point and you win the automatic victory. The Imperium in this case surrenders. You don't do well enough, to get that automatic victory, then there's the how long can you maintain the perimeter? How long can you maintain the defense? And here I do some sort of what that means, but when you consider it in the light of the World War II games, it may not mean anything like that. If you don't get that automatic victory, it may mean that the Zodani lose the war, and you've just exceeded their expectations for how long they could, hold a perimeter against the Imperium or whatever. So that would be probably the light to look at it under, given the other games of its period that are using the same kind of victory conditions. Not this. This is a different mechanism than I'm used to seeing. Usually it's like you get this, this, and this, and you win an automatic victory. Like there's key objectives usually. Here it's much broader than that. You have to pay attention to a lot more stuff. And then holding X out of those objectives past a certain date gets you certain levels of lower victory, and then the enemy has their way of working their way up. Here it's a little bit more flexible because every planet has its victory points. It would be like every, not every hex, but anything of any interest whatsoever having some points associated with it, some of them very small. That makes it a harder problem to perceive and to react with, but it does open up more interesting opportunities as well. So I don't know why I went down that train. It certainly didn't end up where I thought it would. I thought I was going to come up with a criticism, but honestly, the victory point system, at least in base design. Now the question is it, is it too far over towards the Zodani? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think the balancing act isn't there, at least for me, which isn't saying much, and other people who have played the game and post their after action reports and whatnot. And even just comments in the comment section. It really does seem like the game's fairly heavily unbalanced to the Zodani. I haven't seen an Imperial win marked anywhere yet. And I think that the 300 points is too close to get to, and if you don't get to that, being pushed back, the time after which you can throw the switch and say, okay, I'll take the marginal victory or whatever, is also, well, actually, you'd be, if you drop 2 levels and you didn't have the ultimate victory. So you got to hold out a long fucking time to get the win under those conditions. So let me see if I can find victory conditions. They got to be in here somewhere. Here we go. So if you, so I'm in the decisive victory zone. So if I make it to turn 26 in this zone, I could drop it down to a marginal victory and I win. And chances are pretty good that that's what I'd choose to do if I haven't won the decisive victory. But anyway, the way it's structured, I think that the Zodani have the advantage, and that's what the reporting seems to be, which means, but here's the thing, that may be wrong, because very few people play this very heavily, and this may have been play tested to death, and the super players came up with a way to, balance things better. I doubt that. I suspect it's actually just unbalanced. But it's hard to justify balancing a game, so that you have to be an expert for those points to matter anyway. On the other hand, it's equally bad to justify the game having an unbalancing strategy because of knowledge of the game. The more knowledge you have, you're able to find this unbalancing strategy and and one side should win every time. So that's one of the hard things with trying to come up with that kind of point system. What's interesting is the way the point system is devised. The Zodani have a definite, an automatic victory. They can claim victory at various other times of the game. At reduced levels from where they're currently standing, they can call the game and say, look, I take an armistice. And that's actually how it's written, as opposed to, the World War II example. So I wasn't making that up just from my assumptions, I guess. But it feels like it was very carefully crafted. I'm not seeing that strategy, and I don't know if anybody has, but it's possible that it's also possible there was a heavy bias during playtesting. That, maybe they gave incompetent people the Zodani fleet. Maybe the Zodani fleet, maybe there was very little playtesting and the Zodani fleets made a lot of errors, and this carefully crafted design was already in place. I don't know if Chadwick was involved in this. There's something so clever about this. I don't think he was. I think this is a Mark Miller only. Got credits. Well, Chadwick was involved. He may have come up with that clever balancing, the way the victory points should work. That feels like Chadwick. You know what doesn't? These fucking percent numbers. That's Mark Miller special. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, there seems to be something very clever in here. The question is this a game that only makes sense if you studied it heavily, or is it a game that actually is making sense to me in terms of the victory point situation, and they just need to be skewed, they need to be tweaked? I don't know. And this is the kind of discussion that belongs more in the review, although it should be more cogent than I just made. But but it probably won't make it in there. So, you know, it's an Easter egg for those of you who can cope with all of me. Still making multiple fuck-ups relating to plots. And honestly, they get harder and harder, or more likely to happen with me, the more fleets and shit are on the board. I found a couple of ships that didn't end up making their jumps that they were programmed to do. Not a big deal, but I've had ships end up just too far, you know, losing turns that like they shouldn't have. And I try to fix that. And it's sort of the flip side of the don't do gamey stuff on the system, is allow yourself to repair things that are just fuck-ups that aren't that big a deal, but, you know, mean your reinforcements don't get there in time because you weren't paying enough attention to them because of the number of sheets of paper and the mess that, you know, I mean, look at the mess that I'm creating on these. And honestly, between those two things, it's why I think this is a better solo game than it is an opposed one. I feel like both players, if they're like me, would just be constantly screwing up. And, you know, there's also the opportunity to game the mechanisms and try to make these fleets do more than than the intention really was. And it's just one of the factors that I've played this opposed once, I think with my first wife. And it's not something that I would aim for ever with anyone. If someone was really a Traveler fan, maybe, if they were on sort of the same wavelength as I am about what you can correct and what you shouldn't be trying to game in a system. Generally, what I've found is players are either they miss one of those avenues, you know, or maybe they miss both of them. Like, they want to be rigorous with their plots and end up screwing up and not wanting to correct it, which, you know, technically that's fine. I actually do know at least one player who wants to fix things that they screwed up and wants to do gamey shit. And it's like, come on, man. No. That's like, not in this game, but I've run into it in some of the CWB stuff. And I convinced him otherwise, that he was not following his orders any longer. But, you know, it was a weird situation. Anyway. Certain types of games just work better solo, and this one, with perhaps hidden pieces and hidden plotted movement and all that, paradoxically I think is better solo than it is opposed. Seeing an Imperial resurgence right now with, they managed to pin down the quarter fleet found the 17th Colonials. And we're trying to grab this. Now, there's some danger here. There's fleets coming in there, and I don't have a hell of a lot there. I've got the first provisional, which is troop carriers and some scouts. It's great at rooting stuff out of planets and getting victory points back. It's not able to stand up against any fleet. Meanwhile, we've got some risks here, whatever, as the 2nd and 3rd Assault Fleet. We're trying to, like, work together. Hey, how come I didn't take Roop? Oh, because it's the 2nd Assault Fleet, which has no fucking troops. Well, somebody's got to make it there. I've got backup stuff there. Roop is not that valuable. It's a base, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah. Although I don't know, I think I may have cheated on a refueling there because I didn't have troops to grab Roop to use the star base. So whatever. Not a lot of fighting. Looks like we got here, and then the 2 Imperial takeovers. This, I think, is one of the first big space battles we've seen. Big being kind of relative, but 74 firepower points on the Imperial side, but only 19 on the Zodani side. Now, the Colonial fleet just jumped in. They are not ready to follow. I'm sorry, the quarter fleet. The 17th Colonial, though, is fueled up and can get out of there in whatever direction they want to go. The problem is the quarter fleet might be able to follow them. So we'll take a look with that. But with the 19, we fire against the fleet as a whole. We don't segment out the way you do in the ground combat, which it's just kind of weird how different things work. Modifiers, ooh. So this is painful. So out of ships that fire, 1, 2, 3, no, these don't fire. It looks like we're Zodani regular for the majority here. These might be Imperial low. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is kind of a pain. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, it's Imperial low. So, what does that mean? The Zodani have a +1. And the Imperials have a +1 due to leadership. Yeah, we're looking at Zodani standard versus Imperial low. That's going to give a +1 on the table. So we fight over here. We'll be on the 18 column at +1. And we're going to cause a big 6 hits. That'll get registered, but you know, I can look and see what I want to lose, and it's this piece of garbage. This battleship is just asking to die, but yeah, this is not that good a ship. And I'll take its cost. That actually drops me to a 73, but there's no first fire or anything like that. So we're looking at 74. We also have a +1 because we are led by a decent admiral. But I think that only counts for one of the rolls. Let me make sure of that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. And that's the effect of not having a good command span. The commander can only affect. So that gets me on the 48. 48 out of 73 says that I'm going to have a remainder of 25. So a +1, 3. First I do 9. And then without the +1. I do another 5. So I do 14 hits on this fleet. And you can see the losses, they're not great, but they're not incredibly incomparable. Okay. There's 12. That's not good. Let's do 8, 14. It's really kind of a bunch of crap I'm losing, but now I get out of there because I'm fueled up and the Imperials are not, so I can leave and I'll figure out where the hell to go. We're jumping into Yori, which is not a great place. We're going to be jumping into there next turn, and then we have to refuel a turn. The one thing that gives us any advantage at all is the fact that these big fleets are kicking around and may be able to dissuade the Imperials from chasing. these because I could plan to move those big fleets in there. Of course, that slows them down too because there's no fueling there, but whatever. Game of bluff. Arcadia was not taken, was bombed. We're gonna have to refuel next turn. It's got a gas giant, so we can do that within time. And that gets us to the movement plot with very little having happened. It feels, anticlimactic to have these two big fleets slam into each other. Granted, the 17th Colonial, significantly smaller, about a fifth the size, but it's the biggest naval battle we've seen yet, and it was really just, a skirmish type situation with a retreat. That wouldn't be the case if you caught a fleet without fuel, though. If you catch a fleet that's refueling, and if Corridor is plotted to hit this, which I'm sure they're not, then yeah, 17th could be destroyed under these circumstances. And that would cause, we saw a reasonable sized fleet does cause damage to the enemy. It's not like the enemy is invulnerable the way they are in land combat. In land combat, you drop a big unit, with tech advantage or whatever on a smaller unit, and the smaller unit just disappears. Nothing much happens, which is okay because you could just bomb it into submission anyway. All right, plot. And that was the end of 17 otherwise. So the Imperial reinforcements came in. They got the stupid one roll, which gives them no battle squadrons. That's all that's left. For whatever reason, cruisers accrue at, I don't know, what do we got? 5, 10, 11, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. A higher rate than the battleships, but there's a lot more battleships. So you very quickly run out of the cruisers, but the fleet as a whole is able to focus battleships in. That gave me a fleet, not terribly useful in and of itself, but it gave me this transport ship, and I could have started writing rules, orders, and giving a command to that, except the commander who must be given is this one. I don't want him taking that transport ship. I want him waiting around for the warrant. Or waiting around until he gets a decent enough fleet that he can lead it. And unfortunately, the strict command levels are biting me in the ass over there. And again, you can game to get around them, but I'm not doing too much of that. And then I started the discretionary movement. 17th Colonial is kind of locked in to its move. And these guys here are going to grab one of the planets named Dinham, which is worth 10 points. But now I got to try to figure out what all the plots mean. And very soon I need to replace pieces of paper because things are getting a little too hairy. Unfortunately, it's like one fleet is, this is pretty written up, but in some cases it's one fleet is used a lot and others aren't used very much, and you're just left with this, okay? And you've got to recopy prior orders over onto the new sheet so that you're just using one sheet, not all of them. All right. Essentially a lucky thing the Corridor fleet wasn't able to pursue somehow, if they were slightly faster or whatever in terms of their turnaround time. Because 3rd Assault Fleet is in there and digging deep into Imperial territory at this point. Not a lot of points are going to switch hands. We're looking at Pskis, which is not going to change hands as far as I can tell, and Arcadia, which I don't know, that's worth 6 at least. We're close enough, maybe 6 is worth it, but for the Sword Worlds that's dropping a big unit, I believe, like a 100-point unit, so it's kind of a painful choice. Otherwise it doesn't look like a whole lot is happening on the board. Oh wait, Rangent. I'm pretty sure that's not with shit either. It's worth 7, but half 3.5. So yeah. First off, I was mistaken. Yori was worth something. It's worth 13 points, and we took that. Great. 10 points were reversed though in Dinham. Now you would say, "Hey, easy. That's a vacuum world. What the fuck?" Because there was a garrison, a Vargar garrison there. Well, yeah, except I had no regular space combat capabilities, so all I had is bombardment and troops. Sufficient. It wasn't a huge force left behind. It wasn't high tech. I was able to pretty much guarantee a wipeout and get those points back, and that puts us now at 271.5 as our total. We're still, playing around up near the edge, where things could turn very, very easily. These are all fine. Okay, so it's plot time. And the Greek transcription took place. You can see, got a lot neater. Tried to get the spacing a little better. Yes, I'm using, an old sheet in both cases still. In this case, I can probably get rid of the old sheet eventually, but I don't want to, so I'll probably just move those fleets back upward as time goes on. Because we're at the 23rd here, we only have 4 more fleets. There's room for that and tons there. There's a lot of room up here too. I'm not sure. I got 3 more fleets to put up there before, and that's probably enough room to recopy some of those over if need be. The Imperium's deciding to try to make a stand, gathering their entire fleet here. Timing is going to be the issue. We'll see what works, but we've got a lot of ships that are going in there that are under admirals that have long recycle times, and this may be the end of the game in determination there. Unfortunately, I can't chase the Zodani very easily. And the thing is, with the corridor fleet here, I'm threatened by these. I could run this way and go beat up on Graham and try to take some of this stuff. But then I'm cut off from my reinforcement flow. And the question was whether to fall back on those reinforcements really, or to try to make a stand here at this naval base at Inthe. I don't think I have a chance with the stand, but I also don't think I can give up ground. There's just, the points are too big a deal. Anyway, that was so exciting that we're going into turn 19 now. And I mean, the turn 10 reinforcements are barely making it on, right? The early reinforcements from the Imperials are barely making it on, but the game's going to get decided long before these guys come anywhere near the zone. All right. Both fleets kind of gathering. Now, I played a little game. I tell you I don't play games, but I actually kind of cheated the rules, but in terms of creating a fleet when I shouldn't have been able to. In order to get this 212th fleet with just an assault carrier and 2 battleships, that was able to move out here with that speed. I can keep this under his control. I deployed the battleships into the 18th fleet that was recovering, so I have a little bit more firepower, and then I'm going to head back without causing myself issues in terms of the command ratings. What do we got going on? Graham moving out here. Joyous, I should have a little blue thing on Joyous too. They're still bombing that planet. I created a fleet for that. Again, this is cheating. Those fleets are supposed to be created at the end of the turn, but I find sometimes I'm sitting in a situation where there's no additional information, but I'm just more aware of something. Here we've got interesting stuff. First provisional going in. It's going to try to take Denotam back. But the 28th Fleet has slipped in behind it and is now a threat. Well, in front of it, really. And it's now a threat from a direction we didn't expect. And we're kind of facing threats from all directions and not a very fast fleet. I don't think I have an escape in that direction. First provisional. Oh, yeah, I do. I have a speed of 4. I can jump all the way back here, which is where I was planning on going, to tell you the truth, was to get out of the range. But it's probably worth destroying whatever that garrison is and taking the points away if I can. But anyway, 3rd and 2nd Assault, 17th Task Force, they're all gathered here. 17th Task Force is slow, so I probably don't want to incorporate it. So I may have some juggling going on if I'm not careful. I'm sorry, 17th Colonial. Yeah, they're the worst ranked of the leaders, and that's problematic. I can do a couple of things here. I can cancel the 3rd Assault Fleet's move, which is proposed to hit this big space, actually. This is not random. It's not a matter necessarily of me being aware, although I was vaguely aware that, yeah, we're seeing a collision here. This is an important space. It's not a terribly important planet, but it's got a base, it's got a gas giant, etc. So it's a place you can get out of, which is important once you take it. It's also not terribly well defended, which is also important. That means I can land there, grab it, have the starbase, refuel, and get out of there, all in very quick time. That makes it so attractive that, yes, it draws the Imperials there too. Fast refuel, fast turnaround time. But also, if I'm going to put a roadblock, that is the place. Well, not sure I want a roadblock. The 3rd Assault Fleet's bad enough. Now with the 2nd in there and the 17th Colonial, although the 17th Colonial can't make it there. It's got issues. It's probably going to go back and start capturing the valuable planets that I've had taken away because it's very reactive. But here's the problem. If I dissolve 2nd Assault into 3rd Assault, then I have all my good admirals. Then I have this loose admiral who outranks him and ends up in charge of 17th Colonial. So I got to keep 2nd Assault alive and kind of operate them as one fleet for whatever that's worth. I don't consider that gamey. But it does require a lot of work to maintain those separate fleets. That allows you, that becomes more of the EU style of thing, where you're like shaving a unit off this and shaving a unit off that. I may actually move some of the assault ships over into the 2nd Assault Fleet, because I found the 2nd Assault, or some kind of troops there, because 2nd Assault was really hampered by not being able to land on planets. I used up whatever I had. I actually dispatched my assault ships, and they're all over the place. Anyway, battles, I guess. In addition, some points shifting here. First provisional took this. Yeah, I guess that's it. Which was 10, 11 points. Mugan here, or Mugus, is an interesting place. Now, this is the first time in a long time that we've had a ground battle where it was kind of interesting. Like, it wasn't simply a matter of bomb it into nothingness and then hit it with big forces. Here I'm feeling a little crush of time. This is worth good points. So I dropped 500 Vargar at Tech 13 against 100 Imperial Tech 15. That worked out 5-1 to begin with. There's no armor on either side. The 2-point difference drops it from 2-1 and 1-2. So, you know, it's a slightly interesting fight. We only did 10%. I'm willing to stick around there. I have basically no chance of bombing that thing because all I have is 3 strength points for bombing. And there's a +2 to the table. Now I could bomb the 1 unit there. I didn't even try that. That's Tech 11, so that's at -1. Yeah, I missed that anyway. But yeah, just cleaning that thing, the indigenous strength point up would be worthwhile. Now we're at plot. The Imperials have a problem. Their fleet is a lot slower in reacting than the Zodani fleet. And having started to make this decision to have the showdown, I think I'm stuck with it. On the bright side, if 18th Fleet can make it up there before the Zodani can get their full force into play, I actually have some decent numbers. I don't know if it can, though. It's jump 3, which means it's going to take 2 turns. This second assault has to recuperate next turn 2 turns. So we may have a showdown between the 2 major fleets. And that could actually, depending on how it goes and how even the fight is, that could last quite some time. It also can end up with the Imperials in retreat if they lose and having a hard time getting their fleet ready to move anywhere else because they're so slow with their commanders. And so that could end up with pursuits and whatnot where the Zodani are able to make some good gains against the Imperial fleet. Which is one reason why he just wants to stay here. He doesn't want to offer himself as a target to anything. Everything's all plotted for the big showdown. We're going to cut the video here. Because that showdown is going to happen just in a couple of turns. But also, another whole Zodan fleet is coming in. This is kind of painful. So I have maybe 3 fleets. The majority of my ships are B3. And that's going to be in the command, apparently, of this butt cheese who sucks. After that, I think I've got a fast fleet that I'll put under him. And then I have a B2 ship that I guess I'll give to, looks like the provincial governor will get that. I don't know what that 2+2 guy is going to do. There aren't going to be well, reinforcements can be built here. And I have a bunch of squadrons here, but I think what I'll do is I'll leave the commander back there. He's a decent commander. And if we do have that big showdown, I'll be building a lot of ships off map, potentially. And that's actually a big thing. I don't think the 18th Fleet is going to make it in time. And that's a problem for the Imperials. If it did make it, this would be a closer fight. I think the Zodani are going to have the big advantage. Who the hell knows what's going on down here? The first provisional is exceedingly weak. It's really just a target, trying to find its way home. But we got a lot. It's almost surrounded by ships. So, yeah. All right, we'll send this one up, and yeah. Again, it's very hard for me to explain. I'm taking more pleasure in this than I take in much, much better games. And I think there's a facet there. If you look at a lot of the games that I really love, like the AWE stuff that I love, EU, La Grande Guerre, La Révolution Française, in every case, these are games that I think have serious flaws with them. Even things like Empires of the Middle Ages. Now, maybe in some cases I've unveiled enough of the game to see the flaw. Here, it's pretty fucking obvious. But yeah, in every case, it's games that I don't think are terribly good games. but I take pleasure. Now, this is not on that same level. The flaws are more obvious. The pain factor is high for the payoff in any rational sense. But I get this pleasure in watching this unfold in a way that I just don't with most other war games. I'm not sure what else. What else comprises that same kind of feeling? Sometimes I get excited about a game because I can tell it's a good game, even though I'm not enjoying it all that much. In those cases, I'm trying to think of. You'll hear me say things like, "This is a game I respect a lot more than I enjoy." Things like Vietnam. I was afraid this was going to end up like Vietnam, like my 1914 experience, where it's like, there's a lot I like about this game. But I quit early all the time for a reason. Now, whoever I am, whatever's changed in me, I've got more fortitude towards facing and just playing it out and grinding it out. I think some of it was maybe I had more better games back then and didn't have to learn as many. Now, almost anything I have to face, I have to learn. So, like, it's sort of like a different payoff cost ratio than it used to be. But I'm having a lot more fun than I used to, and no clue, I haven't started reading rules to anything else. I'm expecting an XX game in the mail, a playtest, so, well, more than a playtest, where I might be giving design effects, but I have the fear that I'm going to be looking at it and saying, yeah, I don't think this one's going to be my type at all, but we'll see. That's for Robin. I know he's been begging me to do a train game in the near future, and we'll just keep playing this until I'm ready to do a train game for him. All right, sending it up.